efforts during World War II to save Dutch Jews from the Nazi occupation of her hometown of Holland. Eventually, they are captured and taken to prisons and concentration camps. In this election, Corey and her sister Betsy have just arrived at the infamous Ravensbrück concentration camp, a women's labor camp in Germany. We followed our guide single file. The aisle was not wide enough for two. At last, our prisoner guide pointed to the second tier in the center of a large block. To reach it, we had to stand on the bottom level, haul ourselves up, and then crawl across 3 other platforms before we reached the one that we would share with. How many? The deck above us was too close to let us sit up. We lay back, struggling against the nausea that swept over us from the reeking straw. Suddenly I sat up, striking my head on the crossslats above. Something had pinched my leg. Fleas! Betsy, this place is crawling with them! How can we live in such a place? Corey, he's given us the answer. Before he asked, as he always does. In the Bible this morning, where was it? Read that part again. I glanced down the long, dim aisle to make sure no guard was in sight, then pulled the Bible from its pouch. It was in 1 Thessalonians. Rejoice always, pray constantly, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the... That's it, Corey. That's his answer. Give thanks in all circumstances. It doesn't say in pleasant circumstances. Fleas are a part of this place where God has put us. And so, we stood between piers of bunks and gave thanks for fleas. But this time, I was sure Betsy was wrong. Roll call came at 4:30 a.m. After roll call, work crews were called out. For weeks, Betsy and I were assigned to the Siemens factory. The grueling workday lasted 11 hours. Back at the barracks, we formed yet another line to receive our ladle of turnip soup. Then, as quickly as we could, Betsy and I made our way to the rear of the dormitory room where we held our worship service. At first, we called these meetings with great timidity, but as night after night went by and no guard ever came near us, we grew bolder. In the large dormitory room, there was almost no supervision at all. We did not understand it. It was on the 1st of November, a coat was issued to each prisoner. Call-ups for the Siemens factory had ceased, and we speculated that it had been hit in one of the bombing raids that came within earshot almost nightly now. Betsy and I were put to work leveling some rough ground just inside the camp wall. This too was back-breaking labor, but the biggest problem was Betsy's health. She was growing very weak. In mid-November, the rain started, in earnest, chilly, drenching, day-long downpours. Betsy's cough began to bring up blood. We took her to sick call at the hospital, but the thermometer registered only 102 degrees, not enough to admit her to the wards. At last, one night, Betsy's fever registered over the required 104 degrees. A nurse appeared to lead her and half a dozen others into the hospital proper. 3 days later, Betsy returned to Barracks 28. She still had received no medicine or examination of any kind, and her forehead felt feverish to my touch. But the joy of having her back outweighed my anxiety. One evening, I got back to the barracks late. Betsy was waiting for me. Her eyes were twinkling. "You're looking extraordinarily pleased with yourself. You know, we've never understood why we have so much freedom in the big room." "Well, I found out." That afternoon, she said, there had been some confusion in her knitting group about sock sizes, and they'd asked the supervisor to come and settle it. But she wouldn't. She wouldn't step through the door, and neither would the guards. And you know why? Because of the fleas. That's what she said. That place is crawling with fleas. My mind rushed back to our first hour in this place. I remembered Betsy's bowed head, her thanks to God for creatures I could see no use for. It was the week before Christmas when Betsy woke up unable to move either legs or arms. I shoved my way through the crowded aisle to the center room. "Please, Betsy is ill. Oh, please, she's got to get to the hospital." "All prisoners must report for the count." A Dutch woman, on the tier above ours, helped form a cradle with our arms and carry Betsy outside. As soon as roll call was dismissed, we got her back into bed. A coughing fit seized her. When she finally lay still, a stain of blood blotched the straw. She dozed fitfully during the day and night that followed. When roll call was When the sirens blew the next morning, the Dutch woman and I again carried Betsy outside. A guard was standing near the street door. As we started through it with our fragile burden, she stepped in front of us. "Take her back to the bunks." I thought all Pris, "Take her back." Wonderingly, we replaced Betsy on the bed. As soon as roll call was dismissed, I ran back to the dormitory. There, beside our bed, stood the guard. Beside her, 2 orderlies from the hospital were setting down a stretcher. "Prisoner is ready for transfer," she snapped. I looked at the woman more closely. Had she risked fleas and lice to spare Betsy the sick call line? As soon as roll call was dismissed the following morning, I headed back to the dormitory, permission or no. I reached the window and cupped my eyes to peer in. I gazed curiously at what lay on one of the beds. It was a carving, in old yellow ivory. There was no clothing on the figure. I could see each ivory rib and the outline of the teeth through the parchment cheeks. It took me a moment to realize it was Betsy. I raised my eyes to Betsy's face. "Betsy, but she had too much to do. She could not." "Corey." I turned around to see my friend, Mien, who was assigned to the hospital, running toward me. "Corey, I looked for you everywhere. Oh, Corey, come." She led me to the washroom window and pushed me in ahead of her. "Corey, do you see her?" I raised my eyes again to Betsy's face. "Lord Jesus, what have you done?" For there lay Betsy, her eyes closed as if in sleep, her face full and young. The care lines, the grief lines, the deep hollows of hunger and disease were simply gone. This was the Betsy of heaven, bursting with joy and health.